Hey, what's up? This is Jordan, the Mediocre Millionaire. Today's video, we're going to be talking about 3 pros and 3 cons to owning your own business. Some of you know my story. You know that I started my companies in 2015. It was just me, a $45 vacuum cleaner. Started knocking on people's doors, asking to clean their buildings. And today, my brother and I own a janitorial company that does about $1.75 million a year. And then my wife and I, we own some preschools that does right at $2 million a year. So we're doing okay in that aspect. So let's talk about the first pro. So the first pro, whenever you're talking about owning your own business, is the money side of things. And if we're being honest with each other, that's the main reason why a lot of people get into business, is because they hear that you can make a whole lot of money in it. So the part of the aspect that I want to talk about, or the perspective that I want to talk about, is the fact that you can just about make as much as you want to make. And to give you an example of that, I'll talk about the cleaning company that my brother and I own. Like I said, it does like $1.75 million a year. But my brother and I, we don't make that much a year because we pay people to do a whole lot of the work for us. So let's assume that my brother makes $500,000 a year and I make $500,000 a year. And I talked to my brother and I said, man, I really need to make like $750,000 a year. Then that would have to mean that I would have to take on the role of some of the managers that we have. So we'd have to lay them off so I could assume those roles and get that money. We'd have to lay off some of the supervisors that we have, and then I would take on their role and take on their responsibilities. So it really just depends on how much money you want to make and how much time you want to put into working. I would rather put in hardly any time doing the actual work and then forfeiting a whole lot of the income for that. That's just my perspective. So I like to hire people to do almost all of the work and then take a little bit of what's left over, and then let the employees and the people around me build the companies with me and for me. So money part of it, yes, it's great. You get to make about how much you want to, but if you make a whole lot of it, you're gonna be running around like crazy, tired and worn out all day. And that's not what I want to do. The second pro to owning your own business is that you get to work with whoever you want to work with. And I'm not just talking about the people who work under you as your employees. I'm talking about the people that you're working with. So your partners. Whenever I started my cleaning company, it was just me by myself, like I said. But then once I started getting really busy, I started looking around saying, man, I really could use somebody to work with me, like a manager or something like that. So the first person that came to mind was my brother, because he had experience in that industry. And then I trust him like crazy, so it just made sense. So that's why he and I became partners 50-50. And I mean, it's a huge blessing to be able to go from this, which is my brother and I way back in the day. This is like probably in 1990 or 1991 maybe. So that's us way back then, and then this is us today on the cover of magazines together. So being able to work with the people that you trust the most, the people that you care about the most, with my brother and I on one business, and then my wife and I at the other business, and we run those together. So when you run your own companies, obviously you get to hire the employees, but then when you get to bring on and make people partners that you've grown up with and take them out of situations that they don't want to work in, it's a huge blessing. It's pretty cool. It's really cool, actually. The other thing is, what was a huge blessing to me owning my own company. So this is the pro number 3. The huge blessing to me is that I get to learn things at my own pace, and I get to learn things in a way that makes sense to me. So whenever I was working for people, the training process was always a struggle for me, because I always had to learn everything their way. Everything that I had to do was based on the way that they've always trained people, based on the way that they've always done things. I had to use programs that they wanted us to use. Now that I own my own companies, all the rules that we have, they make sense because I've created them, or my wife or my brother has created them. All of the processes that we have, all of the curriculums that we use, it makes sense to us because we've created them personally. All of the spreadsheets that I have to follow that allows me to monitor how much money we're spending here or there, it makes sense to me because I personally created all of those spreadsheets. So everything in our businesses make total sense to me because I personally created them. That's a huge blessing. Instead of having to learn things someone else's way, you get to create the way and then learn it the way that you want to. So that's the third pro for me. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 cons of owning your own business. All right, everybody wants to talk about all the beautiful things, all the really good things, but I like to be honest with everybody and tell you, like, not everything is all perfect and beautiful all day, every day. There are some downsides to everything. So the number one, not the worst part of everything, but the first con that I can think of is the weight of owning your own business. So when you're a supervisor for a company or you're a manager for a company, sure, you do have some responsibilities, but it's nothing like when you own the company. Everybody around you, like I have 120 something employees right now. Everyone around me and my brother and my wife, they look at us, and not everybody, I'm sorry, a lot of people that work with us or for us, they believe that we are their meal ticket. Like they look at us like, Jordan's gonna do this for me, or Marissa or Lance is gonna do that for me. Like there's a whole lot of weight to that. So every decision that you make, it could heavily impact a bunch of families, not just your own family, but it could affect 120 something families. If I talk to one of my clients the wrong way, if I get irritated and fire off an email and then we get fired from that account, a lot of times that could end 10 to 15 people's jobs. They would go jobless because of a decision that I made. So that's one thing. And then also, when I'm talking about the weight of everything, it's like, for instance, payroll. So this is a few months ago, this is at the end of 2022, we had a client who was just not paying us. And they were supposed to be paying us something like, I don't know, $35,000 a month or something like that. And the bill got all the way up to $117,000 that they hadn't paid us. And it was a huge, huge struggle. I couldn't go to my employees and tell them that my brother and I couldn't make payroll, couldn't do that. So I had to figure out ways to make payroll on my own. I went into my own savings accounts, started pulling money out of those. And I mean like $60,000 from my own personal savings, not from the business savings, because that money ran out. So I had to go to my personal savings account and start pulling money out just to make payroll. That kind of stuff can get stressful. You know, like the weight of it is heavy sometimes. But I think it's all worth it, which is part of the reason why I continue doing this. Another con, which is con number 2, is relationships. So this part can get real tricky. I talked about how working with family, I love working with family. I love working with my brother and my wife. But then there's also times where you want to help people out, like your cousins or your friends, and you give them positions, and you can be kind of hesitant on giving them like criticism because you're afraid that it's not just going to mess up the professional relationship, but it's also going to potentially mess up your personal relationship. So trying to keep the relationships in the right balance is real tough because you want to help people around you, but at the same time, you don't want to hurt the relationship long term because the business part of it didn't work out. So that's con number 2. Number 3 is, and I know this is going to sound kind of weird, maybe too sentimental, but it can be, you can feel a bit lonely sometimes, and you might have heard people say it's lonely at the top. I don't consider myself being at the top, but that's a pretty cool, a cool phrase for this point. So let's say whenever I consider myself being pretty self-aware. So let's assume that I'm at a family get-together and I've been struggling all week about a decision that I have to make. And this is an actual real decision that I had to make. I had to take my Range Rover in to get some fixes on it, some repairs. And the repairs ended up being pretty close to $1,500. I had just spent about $65,000 on my campus that we bought a couple years ago. $65,000 repairing a couple of buildings and fixing air conditioning units and all that stuff. And then I had another air conditioning unit go out a couple of days ago, so I had to replace that air conditioning unit for $8,000. So I've got all of those expenses over there, and then I've got a Range Rover that I needed to get. I didn't actually need to get it repaired. It was just having a nagging problem. So I was like, man, I just spent all this money. I gotta fix this air conditioning unit. Should I spend $1,500 just to fix this small issue on my Range Rover? Now, I wanted some help making that decision, just throw some ideas out there like, what would you do or what would you do? But if I'm at a family function and a lot of my family members struggle paying $700 in rent every month, it wouldn't be very self-aware of myself to ask them like, hey, I just spent $65,000. Should I spend $1,500 on my Range Rover? Like, they would probably slap me if I said that to them, because they're like trying to figure out how to pay $700 in rent, you know? So it would kind of be it would be like a slap into their face with me asking them that question. So a lot of the things that I have going on in my personal life are a whole lot different than the things that are going on in my family's personal life that I grew up with. That's my cousins, aunts, and uncles, and friends, and all of that. And then also, whenever you have a serious issue, what I consider a serious issue, like, do I bid $350,000 per year on this business, or should I try to be a little more conservative and bid it at like $297,000 for the year? Like, who do I ask that question to? I don't have anyone in my family or anybody around me that has owned a successful cleaning company before, so I can't really ask them questions like that. So a lot of the times it's just research, looking up YouTube videos, doing things like that on my own, and then talking to my wife and to my brother, trying to figure out how to best make things work like that. Trying to avoid that. I guess whenever you're around people and you want to avoid those rich people problem questions, that's the last thing you want to be throwing at people, because they don't want to hear it. So, and I totally understand that. But that is the 3 pros and the 3 cons that I'm putting out there as a business owner. I would love to hear, if you're a business owner yourself, I'd love to hear some of the pros and cons that you can think of. Put those in the comment section. I'd like to see those. As always, please do like and subscribe. That helps the channel quite a bit. Every like that we get is substantial. Every subscription that we get is also substantial, so we appreciate that support. As always, guys, I appreciate the time. God bless. Take care. Peace.